All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. I have the privilege of having a very special guest on this podcast, a good friend of mine, Coach Dennis Ward, and we are going to be talking a little bit, well, a lot of it rather, about the Las Vegas Raiders and their draft class. I had to catch myself for a minute because I almost said Oakland for a minute. But it's definitely going to be about the Las Vegas Raiders and what they were able to do and not do this past weekend at the draft. I want to say one thing, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Dennis. The Raiders were hopeful, okay, to get a quarterback at pick number 13. And of course, that didn't work out. Things changed when the Atlanta Falcons upset the apple cart and went out there and took Michael Penix Jr. eighth overall. Of course, Minnesota jumped and made that trade with the Jets to go from 11 to 10 rather to take J.J. McCarthy, and then of course Denver at number 12 took Bo Nix. I was one of those people who, going back to the start of last college football season, I said five, maybe six quarterbacks would go in round number one. There were some people out there saying four. I'm like, yeah, you might have some guys that might have late first round, early second round talent, but at the end of the day, there's always going to be a team that gets desperate. And that desperation was expedited when the Falcons made that shocking decision to take Michael Penix Jr. And then, of course, the Raiders decided to pivot since they were out of the quarterback sweepstakes at that point and go with the All American tight end Brock Bowers out of Georgia. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
So, rumors were flying through the mill of the Raiders trying to get to two, to get Jaden Daniels. Of course, we know Antonio Pierce coached Jaden Daniels at Arizona State when he was there with Herm Edwards. And to be honest, I remember watching that team, watching him then. He wasn't quite as good as he became. And it turned into basically we didn't have enough money. I mean, in the draft, picks are money. That's capital. That's what teams want, and or players. If you have someone good enough to get you up from 13 to 2, but the word on the street is that the Commanders basically laughed at the Raiders' offer. So anything short of Mike Ditka, trade all your picks to get in there, I don't think it would have gone over at all. And what the Commanders knew is that you get the 13, you risk the chance of getting absolutely nothing. And that's why the Commanders didn't bite on the trade up to 2 to get Jaden Daniels. Now, fast forward, the draft's going on, and I'm watching, and everything was basically status quo till the Atlanta Falcons got on the clock. And let's talk about that pick a bit because I got one problem with it, and I'm a person that I really liked Michael Penix. I really loved the way he was aggressive and driving the football down the field, and I still believe that if he's surrounded with the right type of receivers and you just get him a line and get him some time, I think he can light it up. But you just gave $100 million guaranteed to Kirk Cousins, who's not the youngest quarterback, but he has $100 million guaranteed. And Michael Penix is 24 years old. So he's not the youngest guy out there. I really don't understand the point of drafting. If he was 21, they could get away with this in my mind. But that 3 years is a big deal. And let's just be honest. 3 years ago, nobody viewed him as a top 10 pick. These guys getting to stay in college longer, like him and Bo Nix, who both played almost 6 years in college, they got to get a lot better. And I think this is something that the NCAA and the NFL maybe need to talk about, because even though these are older prospects, what are you getting is people that can actually play the quarterback position. It's a very underserviced position from the youth ranks, because I'm there, to the high school ranks, because I'm there. And then now you get in the college ranks, and it's just not enough of them. And that's why what happened, William. It's just not enough quarterbacks, not enough good ones. Everybody wants one.
Yeah, it's one of those where you knew you were going to get quarterbacks going one, two, and three, and there were rumors about both the Minnesota Vikings and New York Giants trying to trade up to that three spot with New England. And I talked about this because it was basically a day after the 20-year anniversary where the Giants made that trade with the Chargers, of course, after the Chargers drafted Eli Manning, and the rest was history. And it's one of those where if you feel like you have your guy. Okay, you need to move heaven and earth to get that guy. And you brought up an interesting point about the Raiders talking with the Commanders, trying to move up to number two. I mean, let's be realistic here. You're talking about easily, just to say sake of argument, that the Commanders were willing to talk turkey with the Raiders. Clearly, they're going to swap picks for this year's draft. Clearly, the Raiders would have had to have given up a first round pick next year, possibly maybe even a first round pick in 2026 as well as other picks and players. So if you're the Raiders, okay, and you have a lot of needs on this team. Of course, they needed a quarterback. Um, but you know what? At the end of the day, maybe the asking price was too much. And again, moving up 11 slots, that's a that's a hard ask, in the draft in the first round because you're going to have to give up something. Especially, I mean, you look at this year, the Giants were at 6 and the rumors were that, they were talking to the Patriots, but the Patriots, were asking for a lot. Why? Because the Giants weren't the only team that was willing to move up to that draft spot. The Vikings were as well. So of course, if you're New England, you're going to say, "Hey, let's go for broke here and try to see if we can get something." And of course, that was not the case. They stuck to their guns and took a Drake May. But for me, when I look at this draft for the Raiders, and honestly, I see it as a lunch pail draft. And the reason why I say it is because this is an Antonio Pierce type draft. This is his first draft as the first head coach, as he in his first year as head coach of the Raiders. And you look at it, linebackers, offensive linemen, tight end, and it's one of those. It looks like it's probably going to be Minshew mania this fall on the Vegas Strip for the Raiders. Gardner Minshew is one of those guys. He can give you a couple of good games and then he can give you a couple of bad games. He's kind of like the modern day Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you will. All right. So it's one of those, you got that. You know that the Raiders are, I know that they lost Josh Jacobs in free agency. He signed with Green Bay, but, you're still going to get the football to a Zeus White a lot. You still got Devontae Adams. And now you bring in a Brock Bowers. Now you're working on that offensive line and there's a guy that they did draft that I'm gonna I definitely want to get your thoughts on him soon, but definitely I want to start off with Brock Bowers, the all pro, the all world. I almost called him an all pro, but he was an all American and in my opinion all world tight end coming out of Georgia. I really thought that the Jets were going to take him at 10, and then even when they traded back with the Vikings at 11, they didn't. They opted for the offensive tackle, and the Raiders got themselves a darn good player there at number 13, in my opinion.
I've watched a lot of Raiders drafts in my life, a lot. And I got a interesting nugget that I heard today. This year was the first year that the Raiders had a draft ran by a general manager who wasn't a first year general manager since Al Davis passed away. So that means for a lot of these guys, you know, it was their first time. These guys didn't have any previous experience. And you got to see Tom Telesco, who built a lot of talent, that talented team at the Chargers, regardless of their record. The team is very talented. He knew how to get good players. And, the fact that Brock Bowers is sitting there is just a testament to him just saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to sit here and see what happens. Now, we can go back to previous drafts where I watched the Raiders pass over guys. I mean, I could give you the list. We could just start with the beginning of the the Gruden Mayock era when they took Clarence Farrell at 4, and you had Josh Allen sitting right there, not the quarterback, but the defensive end from Kentucky, who the
Right.
Jaguars just re-upped. I mean, like simple things. I mean, you got no-brainer picks. I mean, even in that same draft, Devin White, even in that same draft, Byron Burns, even in that same draft, Dexter Lawrence. But you take Clinton Farrell, and nothing against Clinton Farrell. I thought he was a solid player, me being a football guy. I got to see that he was okay, but he shouldn't have been the fourth pick. And, you know, it's just a testament to Tom Telesco being a veteran GM. And he said, you know what? When all else fails, take the best player available. And, let's talk about Brock Bowers a little bit. This guy, man, is amazing. I mean, they gave him jet sweeps. He had 5 rushing touchdowns in his career as a tight end. Okay. Yards after the catch is a thing for him, man. You get him the football, he's in space like a wide receiver, man. I wouldn't be surprised if he could return punts, man. This guy is a really, really talented playmaker. And, the Raiders finished with a high ranked defense. So the defense is much better than the offense. So it can't be to anyone's surprise that they drafted offensive players early. And of course, we needed offensive line help I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas. So I love the Brock Bowers pick. Some people don't like it. But I honestly didn't see another route at that point at 13. Even if you look at the rest of the guys drafted in the first round, outside of Quinyon Mitchell, who ended up at 22, the corner from Toledo, if I'm not mistaken, that's the only other guy that made sense to me at that 13. So if they didn't take Bowers, I got my money on saying it would have been the corner, who was an elite athlete. And it's probably going to be a pretty good pro, but I think they did the right thing in taking the best player available with that first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, trust me, you hit the nail right on it. I mean, Brock Bowers was an explosive college player at Georgia, and just to give you an idea, when you think about Georgia's offense, okay, it was primarily running the football. They had talent at wide receiver, but it's not like they had, first round NFL talent. I know Adonai Mitchell, transferred and went and finished up at Texas. So my point is this: it's like you had Lad McConkey, who did get drafted in this, in this draft process, but you know, Lad wasn't a first round guy. So you look at it, and a lot of teams really defensively focused on trying to slow down Brock Bowers in the SEC. And this guy consistently found a way to get open. You look at his games over the last couple of years against Alabama alone. And I mean, when you think about Alabama, we know the first round talent that consistently came out of that school under Nick Saban, especially on the defensive side of the ball, at the linebacker position, at the safety position. And, Brock Bowers was going to town on those guys. So that gives you an idea right there, just how talented that he is. Now you're talking about you're bringing him into a situation with a veteran quarterback like Gardner Minshew. But then also the Raiders have Devontae Adams, and it's one of those where things weren't pretty good, weren't real good for the Raiders the last couple of years. But Devontae Adams has somewhat became forgotten about, in the NFL as far as top tier receivers go. So now I guarantee you the Raiders are going to have packages where they're going to line him and Devontae up on the same side of the field, and it's one of those where he's a matchup nightmare because a lot of tight ends, or for a lot of tight ends, but like with him, uh, you know, outside linebackers are going to have a problem, which means that you're going to have to, bring your safeties up. But if you bring your safety up, of course, Devontae's a guy who can blow it over the top. So, pick your poison. And honestly, the safeties are going to have to come up anyway because we know with Antonio Pierce, he's going to be committed to running the football. We saw that last year. I mean, heck, they won a game, I think it was on Christmas weekend, against the Kansas City Chiefs last year in Arrowhead, where I think they completed like 4 passes or something like that. It was basically Zeus White and the defense. So we know that they're going to play the defense. I mean, play the running game. But the Raiders, like I said, this is a draft to me that I think embodies Antonio Pierce and what he's trying to establish. He wants a physical football team. We saw that, when he took over for Josh McDaniels in the second half of the season. He wants to be physical. He even talked about, this offseason, basically the Jordan rules for Patrick Mahomes, kind of like how the Detroit Pistons back in the days had the Jordan rules when they wanted to be very physical with Michael Jordan, and he wants to go out there and get after Patrick Mahomes. And I think, this is the type of draft where you can do that because it's one of those where, until somebody does it, clearly Kansas City, they're the kings of the mountain in the AFC West. Right now, they're the kings of the mountain in the NFL overall. The Chargers, first under their first year under Jim Harbaugh, they're trying to get after it. The Broncos, of course, Sean Payton basically tore that thing down and is starting over with Bo Nix. And honestly, with their quarterback room, I think Bo Nix already is the best quarterback in that room, in spite of the fact that he hasn't even played one single down in the National Football League. But my point is, the Raiders definitely want to be a physical team. They want to get it done in the trenches. And I'll put it like this with Antonio Pierce. Antonio Pierce played the second half of his NFL career for the New York Football Giants under Tom Coughlin. Tom Coughlin was a disciple of Bill Parcells. And of course, what did Bill Parcells, whenever he got to a team, what's the first things he always did? He always worked on his offensive line. He always worked on his defensive line because why? That's where the games are won. Antonio Pierce did that in this draft. He addressed some needs, in my opinion, on the offensive side of the football. I love what the Raiders did in round number 5, taking Tommy Eichenberg, the outside linebacker out of Ohio State. That guy to me is a football player's football player. He might not come in and start right away for the Raiders, but he's going to be a guy that once he gets on the field, he's going to make it tough for the coaching staff to get off because he's one of those guys he plays with intensity, and that's what Antonio Pierce wants. Okay, you look at what Max Crosby was doing, especially when Antonio Pierce took over. I mean, Max Crosby at times had the potential to play like a man possessed. We saw it more when Antonio Pierce took over for Josh McDaniels in the second half of the season. But nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make, a little long winded there. This was an Antonio Pierce type draft for the Raiders.
Well, so you want me to talk about the second round pick now, Jackson Powers Johnson.
Right.
So I came across him because I actually get to watch some of the Senior Bowl film. So he was at the Senior Bowl, and they do one-on-ones, and his tape was immaculate. I mean, I was so impressed. I was like, wow, who is this guy? I watched it, I watched it, I watched it, I kept watching it, kept watching it. I was like, man, I'd love to get this guy. This guy's good. I said, well, we just paid the center. I don't think we'll draft this guy because the Raiders just paid the center. Andre James just got a new contract from the Raiders. So I couldn't believe it when he was sitting there, and then when I was watching the draft, I was in a bar, so his name came across the screen. And you know how you look twice, and I saw that it was the actual draft pick, and I went crazy because this guy can do it all. He's powerful. He's quick. He is very, 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 very aggressive, and he plays nasty. And this guy, it don't matter where you put him on offensive line, because they called Andre James before they drafted him and said, look, this guy's going to go to right guard, which was a big hole for us. Jermaine Illuminor was our right guard, who's now with the Giants. But he's basically a journeyman lineman. He played right tackle some, played right guard some. I didn't hate him, but this guy's an upgrade, man. This guy's a serious upgrade. He's super tough. He loves being a Raider. Fun fact, he grew up a Raider fan his whole entire life. He had a bunch of Raider apparel. He's a big Raider fan. He's going crazy all over his social media. I think, you know, it's actually a tie between him and Brock Bowers for the best pick we made. Those two picks are just so good that there's nothing else. They could have drafted nobody for the rest of the draft, and I'd say they had a good draft because I really love these two picks. These two guys are going to make the team better, and that's what drafting is about. You need to get difference makers, and they got two difference makers in those two players. So I'll go on as you need me to go.
No, but like I mean, the thing is like you look at it and it's one of those where I think, this is a building block draft. And I say this because, you know, Mark Davis, to his credit, okay, I know it's like some people, clearly, owners or like head coaches, they're just like quarterbacks. People look at their win-loss record. And clearly, it has not been good for Mark Davis, whether it was when the Raiders were in Oakland or, of course, on the Vegas Strip. And, it's unfortunate because, you know, guys like us, we followed the Raiders for a long time. And we knew that once upon a time the Raiders were basically in that category of being a gold standard for success in the National Football League. After their last Super Bowl appearance, it really wasn't good for a while because they didn't draft well for a while. We saw them turn it around or start to turn it around in 2016 when they made the playoffs, and of course, it was unfortunate. Derek Carr got injured; he broke his leg late in the season, and then right after that, the following year, Jack Del Rio was fired. They started over with John Gruden. John Gruden was starting to build things. And then, of course, the controversy, the scandal came out. He got fired. And for me, I thought it was a mistake. Some people have disagreed with me on this. I felt like it was a mistake for them to move on from Rich Bisaccia after he got them to the postseason, especially for Josh McDaniels. I mean, we've seen what Josh McDaniels couldn't do before in Denver. But nonetheless, I think my point is I think he's going to exercise patience with Antonio Pierce. And I think it's one of those where they know that it's not going to be a quick fix. I think this has the potential to be a spit and glue year, if you will, for the Raiders. Not to say that this team won't be competitive because they will. The Raiders are going to be a tough out. They're going to be a team that I don't think teams are really going to be eager to look on, let's say, okay, the coming Sunday, okay, we've got the Raiders because with what I see with what Antonio Pierce is trying to do here is kind of like, Mike Singletary when he took over for the 49ers, without having to go out there and, chew out his tight end, at the press conference. But Antonio Pierce can coach. And I think that's something that, gets lost in the shuffle, okay, because of the whole interim tag last year. Antonio Pierce coached high school ball, he coached college ball. And some of his guys that he coached in high school, I think he was a Long Beach Poly. Okay, they made the NFL. You know what I'm saying? So it's like this guy knows what he's doing. And I think, Mark Davis understands that. It's a process. And like I said, I give the Raiders credit because they were able to pivot because they had their heart set and they said, like most of us said, you know what? Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. are probably going to be there at 13. And then Atlanta really came out of left field, and everybody is still like, okay, what do the Falcons do? But nonetheless, they were able to get the best player available and have themselves a solid draft. And again, like I said, and I'm not trying to sound like a broken record, I do think the Raiders are going to be a very tough out this year.
I hope so, William. I have my reservations about a couple things, but I'll stay on topic. The third round pick, Delmar Glaze. I am not quite as happy about this pick for a couple of reasons. There was a kid on the board who I think is a little bit better than him right now, and is probably going to be a little bit better than him, by the name of Dominic Pooney out of the University of Kansas. He ended up getting drafted by the 49ers. He was a much more athletic version of the same thing. They played right guard, right tackle, both guys. And this guy was straight nasty. Had we had drafted him in the third round, I might be on my roof just like, letting off fireworks. I mean, this kid is just a monster, but I see why they took Glaze. He's a very consistent pass protector. Um, Tom Telesco has this thing about how he drafts his linemen. He wants him to weigh a certain way, have a certain arm length. He has like these things. So this guy fit the mold. But in my mind, if we'd have waited to the fourth round to get him, he'd have still been sitting there. But that's neither here nor there. I hope the kid comes in and adds some depth to the O line, and I think the O line was a focus, and I'm glad they finally started paying attention to it because they could have easily fixed this a couple of years ago. It's right tackle's been a problem on this team for years. Colton Miller's fully entrenched on the left side. They drafted the left guard, Dylan Parham, who was also a center when they drafted him out of the University of Memphis. He's the left guard. So they have a history of doing something like this, taking a center, making him a guard. But he's actually turned into a decent, solid guard right now. So they just needed to solidify this because you can't play offense if the quarterback's on the ground, no matter who the quarterback is. So Delmar Glaze, I mean, like I said, I would have preferred another tackle, but I understood why they took one here. And at the end of the third round in the NFL draft, it was 17 offensive tackles William drafted alone. Just tackles.
Yeah, the first couple of rounds of the draft, there was more of a focus on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, you figure, and this is what I always talk about with the draft, and I've said it multiple times this weekend, and I'm going to keep saying it. Sometimes early on in the draft, more often than not, you have teams that, take reaches in the early parts of round number one. And those teams on the back end of the first round, generally the teams that were playoff teams from the year before, they have guys fall to them that really should have been top 10, top 15, top 20 guys. We saw it, of course, with Brock Bowers, another guy, Dallas Turner, who fell all the way to the Vikings at number 17. So, the quote former NFL GM Bill Polian, he always said it only takes one team to do something ridiculously stupid. And I think it was the Falcons this year, and it really changed the outlook of the draft. But clearly we saw more of a focus on the offensive side of the ball. Six of the first 12 picks were quarterbacks. We saw the receivers in there. Of course, we knew that Brock Bowers was going to be the only tight end taken in round number one. And then, of course, if teams are going to go out there and draft quarterbacks, you got to protect the quarterbacks, and you got to go out there and get your offensive tackle. And then we saw that run happen. But I think it was very good for the Raiders because, again, I can't harp on this enough. You build from within. You build, in the trenches, and you could have all of the talent that you want at the skill positions. If you can't keep that quarterback upright, it ain't going to matter or amount rather to a hill of beans.
This is true, man. This is true. And I'm just happy that they were able to keep Colton Miller happy, keep him there. He was a much maligned pick when John Gruden drafted him out of UCLA. They said he was too weak, he's too this, he's too that. And he's developed into a really, really, really solid left tackle you can depend on. And that's what you want out of your offensive lineman is guys you can depend on. So I think that they made the right approach in getting. I mean, I can't speak enough about this Jackson Powers Johnson kid, man. I mean, you could just look at him and look at his eyes when he talks. You just watch his film. You're like, this is the guy. This is the guy I want blocking for my quarterback. This is the guy I want blocking for my running back. So he's an amazing, amazing guy. I'm so happy that he's on the team. So the Raiders kept going. We'll go to the fourth round now. They drafted. I'm gonna call this, a salute to Al Davis, the Camarion. Uh,
Richardson, the cornerback out of Mississippi State.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
sorry, had a bit of a fraud there. So
Uh-huh.
I actually watched the combine and I saw him run that 4.34 he ran.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, this is Al Davis pick. 4.34 40, okay, 6'2" and a half. All right. He weighs less than 190 pounds, weighs 186. And this is Al Davis pick. This kid did not register a single interception. Now, as someone that's played a lot of football and as someone that's seen a lot of different guys come and go, speed is a great, great thing, but you still need to have skill. And to me, ball production, as they like to call it, is something that I would never overlook in the sake of just drafting a physical specimen. This is not the Olympics. This is football. Now, I will say he does tackle, so that's probably going to get him on the field. At the very least, special teams, you'll probably see this guy running up and down the field making plays because he tackles. He'll hit you. But not to have one single interception at almost 6'3" and running a sub 4.44 or 4.34, that's something that I think is a bit of a red flag. So to me, I'm not crazy about this pick. I think he's somebody that we could have got maybe the next round, but I'll take it. I'll take it because we needed athletes on the team. I think the defense was a little slow in the back end. We didn't have enough athletic guys back there. And sometimes that comes back to bite you, when you get these teams with all these fast plays. I mean, look at who the Chiefs drafted, Xavier Worthy. He's nowhere near better than Adonai Mitchell. But why did they draft Worthy?
Speed.
Speed. there's no substitute for it. When you have a guy that can run, it forces teams to back up. And when
Yeah.
teams back up, then you have the rest of the field at your disposal.
Yep.
So, I mean, to have a guy that can run like that and be that tall, I guess it's a luxury. But to me, that was a luxury pick. I felt like we could have got a player that's ready to play right now. And I'll be real honest, Will. You seem to be a fan of Zeus White. I'm not the biggest Zeus White fan. I feel like he doesn't run with much vision. He's a big, strong, fast, athletic guy. He doesn't feel it in there when in the zone scheme. If the gap's not there right away, he's not going to find it like Josh Jacobs. Like letting him go was a big hole for me in the offense because he was the cog in the machine. And Zeus White, I mean, listen, I wish him the best. I'm a Raider fan. I want to see him do well. But I would have preferred the Raiders to have gotten their hands on a runner that can get in there and find it in between the tackles and use his vision and actually run with his eyes. Blake Corum would have made me happy. Any of these guys would have made me happy. But the Cambion Richardson guy, we'll see if he develops. He has a lot of work to do.
Well, it's a perfect segue right there because I was going to ask you, the Raiders' sixth-round pick, the running back out of New Hampshire, Dylan Laub. What are your thoughts about him?
So I had to go pop in a bunch of tape about this guy. He's really interesting. So he was at the Senior Bowl. He ran at the combine, ran 4.5. You comp him to give you a picture of what he plays like. Danny Woodhead comes to mind. Small school guy. He went to the University of New Hampshire. I bumped into a guy today that played at Yale. Told me his teammate transferred to New Hampshire. Said this guy's a dude. Said this guy's legit. Rocked up. You see him with his shirt off in his pro day. He's like muscles everywhere. But they got him because he can catch the football. He can catch the football. He had 1,700 all-purpose yards last year. He had 33 touchdowns in his career at New Hampshire, and he only started for 2 years.
Yeah, and I think
Right?
what got like not to cut you, but real quick, but like what to me, I think what got him drafted was that big game I think that he had against Central Michigan. So
That definitely got him drafted. 47 touchdowns his senior year in high school. Like stuff like this, you never overlook when you're looking at players, guys that have always been productive, regardless.
mhm,
You look at a guy with 47 touchdowns his senior year in high school.
yeah.
Okay, now you gotta, that's gonna make your ear go like, damn, 47 touchdowns, a lot of touchdowns. So this guy, I'm a little hopeful for him. The thing that bothers me about him, William, doesn't break tackles, doesn't really run it in between the tackles. He's out there to run the ball outside and catch screen passes, and they even lined him up a wide receiver quite a bit. So he's a chess piece. So he's
Right.
a versatile player. Also, let's not take out the equation. He returns punts. So I can see him
Yeah.
doing very well with that. Tremendous short area quickness. I don't see a lot of make you miss on his film. It's more like he outran a lot of people. And then if I'd have saw a bit of better 40 time, I'd have been like, oh, okay. But because he was at New Hampshire, a 4.5 40 time, and then him outrunning anybody, that kind of scared me a little bit. But you do see the short area quickness. So I do know he'll be able to get open and he'll catch the ball. I don't know if he can pass protect though. So we'll see how that goes.
Oh, listen, I think he makes a team, and I think honestly, they're gonna find packages for him, and it wouldn't surprise me to see them have him and Zeus White on the field at the same time, trying to switch it up. I think the Raiders, to me, are going to be a very interesting team next year. I'm not going to say a playoff team right now, but I will say they're going to be very interesting. Why? Because you have you have a head coach in AP who has that. I'm not going to say it's an it factor. I'm going to more in line call it. You know what? He has an edge about him. He has a little nasty about him, and that's a compliment from where I'm coming with that one. And then you have a guy in Gardner Minshew. Gardner Minshew, like whenever he's a quarterback for a team, they're always interesting. Like one way or the other, they're just very interesting. So I think this is like a Raider type team that they're putting together as far as like a cornucopia of characters, if you will. And I say a Raider type team because you think about the Raiders in their heyday in the 70s and the John Madden, they had a lot of characters. You think about the Raiders, when they first went to LA, they had a lot of characters. You think about the Raiders when they first came back to Oakland. they had a lot of characters. So I think this could be a very interesting team this season. And like I said, they're a team that you're gonna have to pack a lunch each and every Sunday if you're gonna beat them.
Yeah, this should be an interesting group, man. Speaking on the guy you spoke on, Eichenberg, you know, he's just a tough guy. I mean, watching the games last year, we could have really used somebody that can really man the middle of a defense and really be aggressive and fill run gaps. Devon Diablo is a former safety out of Virginia Tech. He was hurt constantly. When he was in there, he struggles to get off of blocks. So it was a bit tough with him in there. Robert Spillane came in and did a really good job, though, as a guy coming from a backup role into a starter role. But I could see these two guys playing next to each other and really balling out. A lot of people believe that he will take a spot, yeah, boy Eichenberg, and we will see. Football players first before athletes, so we'll see. I got an interesting guy I want to speak on. I don't know if you heard about this guy we drafted. I'll skip all the way to the seventh round. Trey Taylor, safety out of Air Force.
The Air Force, yeah.
So this guy won the award for the best safety in the nation.
Was that
Um,
Is that Ed Reed's cousin?
yeah, he stole my thunder a little bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Ed Reed's cousin. He scored 5 defensive touchdowns in his career. That's a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
A lot of interceptions, over 6 feet, jumped a good vertical, had a good 3-cone, had a good shuttle. He just ran a 4.6. I don't know how I get somebody with that much production into the seventh round, but it's weird to me because when you play safety, safety's a feel, and for him to have done that many different things, kind of sort of appeals to me. I somehow believe he ends up finding his way on the field. Big guy, and he's 212 pounds to the boot. 5 defensive touchdowns? That's a lot
No,
of touchdowns on defense, man.
listen, I think he finds his way on the field as well too, because it's like when you're talking about, Air Force, this is not like the old days where where some people just looked at the guys coming out of the service academy. It's like, no, I'm like, listen, Air Force has had a legit team. And I think, Air Force, I think they won their first 8, maybe 9 games last year before they had an injury at quarterback, and that changed things. And Air Force was doing this in the Mountain West, so it's not like he was doing this against some cupcakes out there, so to speak. He was having this production against some quality schools, your Boise State, your San Diego State, your Fresno States, your Wyomings, and so many others. But at the end of the day, that's where you rely on your scouting because those day 3 guys, you always want to see if you can find a diamond in the rough. And maybe the fact that he ran a 4.6, maybe probably scared some teams off. But at the end of the day, I come from the Jerry Glanville school. And Jerry Glanville didn't believe in going to the combine. His whole thing was, I want to put on the tape and see if a guy can play because some guys can be workout warriors, a la Mike Mamula. You remember Mike Mamula from about 30 years ago?
Yep.
He was a top 10 pick to the Philadelphia Eagles just because of his workout. And of course, in a couple of years, he was out of the league. Why? Because he couldn't play football. And it's one of those where do you want a guy that dazzles at the combine? Do you want a guy that is phenomenal in shorts and a t-shirt? Or do you want somebody that can play football? And for the plays that he made on the field, at the end of the day, this guy can play. And I think it's going to be up to for the coaching staff to put him in the right positions, to coach him up, do whatever it is necessary. And I guarantee you, as a cousin of Ed Reed, he's had plenty of conversations, as far as playing the position. He's probably not going to be Ed Reed, okay? And that's fair because Ed Reed was one of the best safeties to have ever played in the National Football League. But nonetheless, if he can go out there and make an impact with his team, I think you know what, you got yourself a steal in the 7th round.
Yeah, I'm happy about this guy. I think I watched one Air Force game. He made a couple tackles. I don't think he got any interceptions that game, but it's just this draft was a very weird draft. All the quarterbacks go early, then another quarterback doesn't even go again till the 5th round. It was very strange how a lot of the positions were treated. And safety was considered to be a lull. And then I saw a bunch of safeties getting drafted, and I was like, really, like the pass defense is such a need at all times in the NFL that no matter how good the players are, they're gonna get picked. My kids I coach at high school at Erasmus, I tell them, I said, you want to play? In the next level? Go play defense. And this is just more of a point to that. The Raiders drafted 3 defensive backs this draft. They took another one in the 7th round out of Pitt. Now this guy got his hands on a bunch of footballs, and his measurables were pretty decent. I'm
You're
not sure
talking,
why he was Devonshire
yeah, you're talking
out
about
of Pitt.
yeah, MJ Devonshire. And I
Yeah,
mean, and listen to your point. Pat Narduzzi knows how to coach up his guys defensively at Pitt. Of course, when Michigan State was having their heyday under former head coach Mark D'Antonio, Pat Narduzzi was his defensive coordinator. He was a defensive coordinator when Michigan State won the Big Ten, when they got to the college football playoff, all of that good stuff. So maybe they can get something out of Devonshire, and also to the other point that you made, it's a scenario where, listen, the Raiders know you're in a division right now. You got Justin Herbert with the Chargers. You've got Patrick Mahomes with the Kansas City Chiefs. So you're not going to stop those guys, plain and simple. But you have to find a way, kind of slow them down, make it a little bit tougher for them. So this is like where you go in and bring guys like this, especially with what the Chiefs are trying to do now offensively. I mean, it's scary because the Chiefs won the Super Bowl last year without a lot of talent on offense, and that's very scary. So now, they're trying to get better and like shore up some of those slots. But you want to get after those teams, and to get after them, you have to rush the passer, but you also have to be able to contain on the back end as well. So I think the Raiders, they're trying to do that.
yeah. I mean, they did a good job of getting an interior pass rusher, and someone's going to push the pocket, and that's going to help Max Crosby, and then the 1st round pick from the year before, the Texas Tech. Um, he's got a lot of development to do. That he is a really big, tall guy, but hopefully, you get that interior rusher, and then that can help everything else. We haven't had a guy to play in the inside and be good in a long time. I mean, you are probably got to go back to like, Chester McLaughlin or somebody, Darrell Russell and these guys. And, the Raiders always had good interior linemen because Al Davis made sure we did. And for us to go this long without having a guy as good as we got now in in Wilkins, it's kind of sort of appalling. But Max Crosby is going to have a really good year if he gets single blocked, and he's going to play right next to Max Crosby. So that's going to be a hard job for offenses to deal with. The Chiefs are always going to be a hard problem because they have football's version of Stephen Curry, and that's Patrick Mahomes. He somehow figures it out. You watch the games, it looks like they're about to lose. Next thing you know, he throws a behind the back pass in football and they win the game. I don't get it, man. You know, but I have to say, as bad as it's gonna sound as a Raider fan, I kind of like Patrick Mahomes. I do want to beat him, but he's likable. I gotta admit that.
So what?
Um,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you got a question? I'll
No,
answer the
no, no, no,
question.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your point first.
Um, I'm just happy to have looked at a draft and felt like I had a competent person at the wheel. I watched the interview with Mike Mayock on Chris Long's podcast, and he was basically saying he never wanted to draft Clelin Ferrell, and he's saying he wanted to draft another guy, but John Gruden was really, really the one pulling the strings at that time. So Mayock to me maybe gets a bad rap for what happened because I believe him. I've watched him enough when he was on TV to know he understood value, to know he understood where players should go. And he's basically telling John, like, look, if you want this kid, I'll draft him down here, but I don't want to take him here. And John was like, F it, just take him there. And it's just sad to see all that draft capital wasted in a good draft with so many players, and you come out with the worst.
Well, I
Josh
mean,
Jacobs, and that's it. 3 1st-round picks who come out with Josh Jacobs. So Tom Telesco, being a veteran GM, knowing how to draft, I did enjoy feeling comfortable that he was going to make a good pick. And I think that hopefully we are going to get somewhere this year. The team's a year away, William, maybe two. They're going to have to trade Devontae Adams. If I was Telesco, I would have did it this year. But I'm sure that he got handcuffed by either Mark Davis or Antonio Pierce. So,
Well, it's kind of like the same old because it's one of those where, yeah, Mike Mayock was a general manager, but the thing was Gruden had final say, and that was kind of like worked in to Gruden's contract, and it was kind of like, basically it was one of those where everybody knew going in that the GM was going to have to report to the head coach. So of course, whenever you have a situation like that, it makes it tougher to find a general manager because, of course, in that more often than not, the GM does want final say, in matters. But like, to your point, I think they are a year away. I think getting the quarterback would have expedited that situation, but it's like this is why it goes back to what I said before. Teams aren't really going to be like trying to say, "Hey, lining up, oh great, we faced the Raiders," but it's just a fact of you look at the quarterbacks in the AFC. You know, the Jets are hopeful clearly that Aaron Rodgers can play more than 3 or 4 plays this year, naturally. You still got Josh Allen in Buffalo, but I think Buffalo takes a step back this year due to all of the talent that they lost. Um, what's Miami going to be? They still got Tua, okay? But then, we got to see what Russell Wilson looks like with the Steelers. You've still got Lamar Jackson with the Ravens. The Bengals are hopeful to be healthy, especially with Joe Burrow. What's Cleveland going to do this year with Deshaun Watson? I mean, they got to the playoffs last year after calling Joe Flacco when he was on his couch. You know what I mean? And then, of course, like I said, you've got Mahomes, you've got Herbert, you've got CJ Stroud. What's Jacksonville going to do with Trevor Lawrence? Like, that's about 10 or 12 quarterbacks that I just rattled off right there on the AFC side, alone. So I think it's going to be, tough for the Raiders. But what would your final grade be for this Raiders draft?
well, I actually want to comment on something you were just talking about just now, the
Hmm.
whole quarterback thing. That's the $1 million question. Where are these quarterbacks going to come from? Let's look at the guys coming out next year. You got Sanders, you got the kid at Georgia, Beck. Where's this next quarterback coming from? And this is why it's stupid to let go of a proven commodity. Is no matter how people feel about Derek Carr, if he was still there right now, you wouldn't have these same questions, William, would you? You'd say, "Oh, this team could make some noise because they have an okay quarterback." No, he wasn't the best, but you just let him go for nothing, and it just set the team back. But moving forward, I give this draft an A minus. I love the first two picks. The first two picks are starters, but then I look at the rest of the picks, and then I can't find a starter. Like to me, I feel like your third round picks is somebody to be somebody you'd be like, oh, this guy could probably start for me, or he's going to play snaps. We drafted a tackle that he's probably not going to beat out the guy that's there now, Thayer Mumford out of Ohio State, who was a
Hmm.
7th round pick for us a couple of years ago. Actually, he's developed over time. But what I'm saying to you is that's why I'll downgrade it. The first two picks are so good to me, I'll still give it an A. But the rest of the picks, I don't know how much of a contribution we'll get from those guys. 4th round corner, he's developmental. I got more hope out of the 7th round corner than I do from the 4th round corner. I don't even know if that makes any sense to you.
No,
But
it
to
does.
me, that's where I look at it like, okay, good picks in the first few rounds, back 4 rounds, I'm not as crazy about because I don't feel like any of those guys will play much this year.
Well, listen, I think, I'm right there with you with the developmental aspect. It takes time. But I think, you figure if you have 7 or 8 picks in your draft, okay, some teams have more, depending on the comp picks or like the Cardinals. I mean, it seems like every time you turn around, the Cardinals or the Eagles, we're picking this weekend. But nonetheless, if you can get like 2 or 3 legit starters out of a draft class, you've hit. You know what I'm saying? So if the Raiders can find those guys, clearly Brock Bowers is going to be a guy for them for a while. But then, one of those 2 linemen that they took, if one of those guys could stick, if one of those corners can stick, if that safety can stick, if Eichenberg can stick, you've listen, you've had success right there. So I mean, for me, I'm gonna give the Raiders a B. And the thing is like, listen, I love them going out there and getting Brock Bowers. It's unfortunate that they missed out on the quarterback. Okay, and that was the toughest thing because you figure once the Vikings took JJ McCarthy at number 10. You only had one more quarterback on the board in Bo Nix. And what was it like, just to say sake of argument, what was it going to take for the Raiders to move up ahead of the Broncos from 13 to 11 with the Jets? And would the Raiders have been willing to do it? So the trade didn't happen. All right. So
And
they
that's who's to say that they even wanted Bo Nix.
and
Uh,
that
I
was
think I think the
that
guy they
was
had their eye on was Penix.
right.
It wasn't Nix. Nick's name never came across any of the
And
stuff that I read on my side.
And see,
So
that was going to be my next point because it's one of those where, okay, you had one quarterback left, but at that point, are you just going to sit up there and say, okay, we're taking a quarterback just for the sake of taking a quarterback, even if it's somebody who we don't want who doesn't fit? So to that point, they stuck to their guns, okay, and they went out there and got the best player available, and I applaud them for that. And I still think that the Raiders had themselves a solid draft, sans not getting a quarterback.
there's nothing we could do about it if those guys are gone before the team drafts. And it's just a sad situation because you put yourself in a quarterback need area to begin with. I really don't understand why they allowed Josh McDaniels to come in there, take a team that just made the playoffs and totally run it into the ground. And that's what he basically did. Alienated guys. He just was bad, and I'm just happy that he's gone and happy that Antonio Pierce is there because he inspires the players, and the team played so much harder for him than they did for McDaniels. It's not even funny. It was to the point where I wouldn't even really want to watch the games when McDaniel was still there. And then Pierce started coaching, he took over, and the team just looked different, man. So I foresee a top ranked defense again for the Raiders. Maybe your guy Eisenberg cracks starting lineup. I could see it happening. So we can go on and on about that part there, but excuse me, I'm still going to be optimistic that the two picks that we have will be difference makers because that's what you really want. You want people that are going to make a difference in the outcome of games. Guys that score touchdowns make a difference in wins and losses, and that's what Bowers is probably going to do. Let's just say he gets a hot 6 touchdowns. We got zero production from the tight end position last year, zero, and that's after drafting one in the second round, who hardly played that. He didn't play that much either. So this is it's about as good as you can expect. Minshew, is like Fitzpatrick. He could go out there and look like a Pro Bowler for 6 weeks, and then in week 7, next thing you know, he throws 5 interceptions. That's it. He's on the bench.
Yeah, no, it's going to be very interesting. But I like you, I am a fan of this draft class. But before we wrap this thing up, any final thoughts that you want to put out there?
This was a very interesting draft overall. Um, Before the draft hit, I counted 14 wide receivers that will end up starting from this draft. That's a ridiculous amount. I mean, I wish we'd have took one of them. To be honest, I feel like we need a speed guy, but that's neither here nor there. Um, I really like the wide receivers out of this draft. They're going to look back on this draft, and these wide receivers are going to be the guys. Now, the quarterbacks, this could be really big hit or miss. Drake May scares the crap out of me. He's very erratic. Reminds me a little of Josh Allen when he came out, and we saw how much Josh Allen struggled early on before he got Stephon Diggs. So I don't know how fast he's ready to make plays. You're gonna see he's gonna throw a perfect pass, and the next one might sail clear over somebody's head. So he's a little inconsistent. I like Daniels, but guess what? He's got to stay on the field. He allows himself to take too many big hits. I feel like Caleb Williams does a little bit too much freestyling. He almost will wait for the play to break down and then he'll freestyle. Not a fan of that either. I love Penix. Of course, he's got to stay in the field too, and he needs to be in a certain type of system. What I do like is him going to a team like Atlanta, where he's going to play in a dome, and that'll remove a variable for him, even though he's got a good arm, and they could have a high flying offense with him out there. I was never a huge JJ McCarthy fan, not enough production for me. And Bo Nix, I just wasn't never really crazy about him. I think he'll be a solid pro. I think he'll be an okay quarterback, but I don't think he's gonna knock anybody's socks off. But need trumps everything else, and everybody needs a quarterback, and that's why you saw that.
Yeah, no, listen, night one was very interesting all around, but I think this draft was very interesting, and I think it has potential to be very good for teams that were able to go out there and fill specific needs. But at the end of the day, that's the name of the game. So let's see what impact players will come out of that, especially right here as we're talking about the silver and black, and let's see what impact players come out of this draft class for them for this year, and maybe for the coming years. But Coach Ward, as always, it's been a while, but
Yeah,
it's been too long rather, But
yeah.
I definitely want to thank you as always for the time and pleasure, of being on this format with me. It's one of those, I mean, you and I go back about 30 years now. You know what I'm saying? Without giving away either one of us, either one of our ages, you
Yeah, I
know,
think 30 years is correct.
yeah,
30 years is correct. And we've been talking about sports for 30 years. That's crazy, man.
yeah, man, yeah,
Yeah.
but as always, it's a pleasure. And next time around, it won't be as long as it has been as far as this gap on here. But as always, man, thank you for joining me on this podcast, man.
Thank you for having me, brother. We gotta make time, man. Tomorrow's
Definitely.
not promised. So we gotta definitely find time to come and just do this. This is what we do. This is our therapy, man. This is how we
Yeah.
cope with life. So, you know,
Yeah.
I gotta get you to come out to one of the games, see my guys, man. We'll chat about that. I'll tell you to come out, let you come check out a game.
Okay.
They're doing the field over now, and have you come out, man, sit in the stands, enjoy some football. You know, you
Listen.
know. Funny but true story. I bumped into Mr. Dolan at a Nazareth rekindled the program, and Mr. Dolan came to the game, saw me.
Wow.
He looks younger now than he did. He looks younger now than he did when he was our gym teacher.
Wow.
Yeah,
Taking
he's the AD now, though. So just
taking
thought I'd hit you with that one, man.
taking it back, man. But nah, listen,
Yeah.
definitely, man. As always, it was a pleasure, man. And thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in once again to the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. And once again, I want to take this time out to thank Coach Dennis Ward for his contributions to the special podcast today about the 2024 draft in regards to the Las Vegas Raiders. If you like what you saw and heard on this podcast, please feel free to hit the like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, if you're on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'll be my pleasure to follow you right back. And also, there's a sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So for Dennis Ward, my name is William Martin, and I'm signing off, saying thanks once again for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.